Welcome to the show. I'm Doug Johnson, and this is The Business of Life. During each show, we highlight a local personality who has something to share with us about their success and tips that might help all of us become more successful. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, co-owner of several facilities, shall I call them, stores, restaurants. You'll know exactly who it is when you meet him, and a great friend for over 30 years. Our guest today is John Lane from the Winking Lizard. John,
hi, Doug.
Thanks for being here.
So good seeing you again.
Well, likewise, and I'm so happy that you agreed to do the show. So John, I mentioned organizations, stores, restaurants, taverns, pubs. Everyone knows you for the Winking Lizard.
Yeah.
You're also part owner of something called Lizardville.
Yep.
We all know what the Winking Lizard is. What's Lizardville?
So where we really concentrate on, food and beverage with a real heavy emphasis on food and Winking Lizard. With our background with beverage, we never could really take advantage of a lot of these small little breweries and small brands that would come out, and we couldn't take advantage of it. So we created Lizardville, and it's kind of modeled after a Belgian beer store, but it's got a little twist because 8 years ago we recognized that whiskey, brown spirits, was starting to become very popular, and so we've done a pretty good job, I think, of teaching people about better beer. So why not teach them about better whiskey as well? So we've got about 800 or so beers on the shelves where you can drink them there, on premise, or you can take them home. And then we have, in the back bar is all whiskey, and we have about 350 different whiskeys, and we've got a huge book and really teach people about whiskey. So it's fun, more of a beverage-centric concept, and we've got 4 of those.
I think that's great. So, John, how did you get there? What's your backstory? I know you started in the Army.
Yeah, that's funny. I went right here. I'm not really a Cleveland boy. I'm an Akron boy, but I did go to John Carroll, and was an ROTC scholarship winner. So left 2 days after I graduated and went right into the Army and learned how to test fly helicopters, 2 years of training. And I was married at the time, and we had 2 little boys pretty quickly, and moved my wife 7 times in 6 years. And we were getting ready to go to Germany. I was pretty excited about going to Germany. She was not excited about going to Germany. And my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, my brother-in-law started the Winking Lizard with my sister-in-law, and they wanted to open a second restaurant in Twinsburg. And I didn't know my brother-in-law that well, Jim Callum, but I knew his wife Mo pretty well. And she nudged him and said, "There's your guy to open the second restaurant." And so my wife was ecstatic because she could come home. She's one of 12. And we both started working. She worked at the Bedford Heights Winking Lizard for about 12 or 13 years, and I started the Twinsburg Lizard. So I like telling people, I went from test flying helicopters to flipping burgers and pushing pizza dough and serving draft beer. So
kind of the reverse of what people normally think.
Yes.
So family obviously is very important to you.
Yes.
And Molly and you now have...
Yeah, I have 3 children. They're all grown. I have 5 grandchildren. And I tell my kids all the time, they don't matter anymore. It's my 5 grandkids. That's what matters.
Sure they love it. Yeah.
But my oldest son is in the business. He's actually the buyer. He's the one in charge of the 4 Lizardvilles. And so, in those early days, as you well know, I would work 7 days a week and an ungodly amount of hours, and didn't get to spend a lot of time at home in those days. It was a treat when my wife would bring the kids up to visit at the Twinsburg Winking Lizard. And my oldest one was the one I got to spend the least amount of time, but I'm blessed now because I get to work with him every day. And so he's got a passion for bourbon and beer, just like the old man. So we're
really
having
cool.
fun. Yeah, it is cool.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice. So we often talk, us Twinsburgers, about the fact that we would love to have a Winking Lizard back in Twinsburg.
Yep.
That was the place to be back in the day.
Thank you.
And
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was. Yeah.
Well, never say never, Doug.
Well, okay,
Never
John.
say never.
Okay. Okay, we're going to hold you to that. Yeah, okay. For sure. For sure. What do you think, being a test pilot in the Army, a helicopter pilot, how did that prepare you for these 30-some years of what you've been doing with the restrooms?
You know, I was blessed. I just actually last year I was asked to give a talk at the Association of United States Army dinner at John Carroll, and when they called me up and they said, "John, would you do this?" And I said, "Well, who did it last year?" And they mentioned a general, and the year before it was a general. I go, "Why do you want me? I was a lowly captain when I got out." And they said, No. But you became an entrepreneur. And so what were those lessons that you learned, there were so many. You know, we're in the people business now, Doug. It's the people business. Yes, we serve beer and we serve food, but it's all about our people. And I, in my humble opinion, I don't think there's any better training in the world than the United States Armed Forces. When you are telling a guy when to get up, when to go to bed, when he eats, when he's, all those things, and you've got that much control over a person's life, and the whole organization has that much control over your life, you learn a lot of life's lessons and a lot of leadership training. And so it really, when I left the Army, I was sad. No doubt about it. I would have stayed in the Army for sure if my wife would have been happy. I would have definitely stayed. But learning those life lessons in the Army really prepared me to be a leader. And I told her, I said, you know what? I'm getting out, but as long as I'm leading people, I think I'll be happy. And I have been. It's 30 years. I'm still doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So we'll get to strategies later, but what were a couple of the leadership lessons that you learned?
Well, there was a bunch of things. I learned, equal opportunity. There's nothing better than the armed services, again, for equal opportunity. The race relations there's no tolerance for having being a bigot or having an issue with someone just because of their race. There's just no tolerance. And in our industry, we have all walks of life, walking in the door and working for us. And so I always point to that as probably being the biggest lesson I learned, because let's face it, I actually went to high school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I mean, small little town with 30,000 people, but it was probably 98% white. And, I get thrown into the Army, and you learn very quickly that. I think the other thing that I really learned is, respect for people and who they are and what they bring to the table to become a team. And I think even looking now at my two partners, which we've been together, there were other partners, but the three of us have been pretty much together for the last 17 years. We're complete opposites. And when we get together, we form a really strong team. And I think, we try to impress upon that with our managers today, on that teamwork, and that, no, they might not be exactly like you, but what do they bring to the table that could be a strength? And I think that's another key thing I learned.
I like the fact that you talked about respect, because I think in today's world, there's not enough of it.
Yeah.
And I just think that if, like you say, if we respect someone who's different from us and their opinion, it's okay to disagree.
Yes.
And I think if people right now who have a confrontational attitude would step back for a moment and say, you know what, we might not agree on this, and that's okay. Let's figure out where we do agree, and let's work from that vantage point. that I think we'd be a whole lot better off as a society.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we don't listen enough, and that's a
huge.
big thing, I think, for sure.
That's
Especially
huge.
today's world, we don't listen enough because we're constantly, everything's so much faster. We're texting rather than picking up the phone and discussing or that. It's just out there too fast. So I would agree with you.
And isn't it amazing that many people today don't understand the power of the voice or body language, and that's really how we form opinions.
Yes.
And if we're looking at our phone texting, as you say, it's very difficult to form those opinions and so on and so forth that you can't do if you're on your phone.
Right.
So,
You're absolutely right.
interesting. So, John, you've been very, very successful. You have been knighted, Sir John Lane.
Yes.
Now, let me get this right. By the Belgium Brewers Guild and the Mashstaff of the Knights in Belgium.
Yes.
So, you're laughing. Tell us all about that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's probably one of the highlights of my career. The Belgium Brewers Guild is the oldest, longest lasting guild still in Belgium, and I like to compare Belgium to us a lot because there are so many mixed cultures there, just like our country, and that's why I think I love going there. I mean, you had the French overran them, the Germans, the Dutch, and so you've got this mishmash of people that are thrown together in this country that was formed in the middle 19th century. And brewing has been such an important export of theirs. And so the brewers and the family of brewers get together every year, and they take nominations. And you have to be nominated by one of these breweries, and then they're put in front of a panel, and then the panel says yes or no. And I was nominated by the Duvel Mortgott Brewery. So Michel Mortgott, who is one of the family members that owns Duvel, and Duvel is one of my favorite beers as well. And so it's kind of a reward to people that are helping perpetuate that Belgian beer culture. And so it's quite an honor. It's wonderful. It wouldn't happen here like it does there. You go to church, they bless you, they bless the beer. I'm not sure that the church would do that here in the United States, and then you go to City Hall where you're brought up in front, and they have the Mashstaff, which is like a pitchfork that they use to take the grain out, and that's what they use to knight you.
Wow.
And you have a medal, and then every year I'm invited. The ceremony is always during Brussels Beer Weekend, a celebration in the Grand Place, which is one of the most beautiful squares in all of Europe. And we honor all the new knights and then celebrate over a few beers. So
what an honor.
Yes, yeah, it was 6 years ago, and there's now a second Sir John here in the state of Ohio. I was the first one. He just got knighted this past September. John Mediate, who works for the Duvel Brewery, was well deserved, and I was over there when he got knighted. So yeah, it's something special.
Nice. You are also the first cum laude ambassador outside of Belgium for the Trappist monks who brew oral beer.
Yeah, Orval.
Orval,
yes. And again, these Trappist breweries have such a long history. If you think back, I mean, people didn't drink water, and so where would they go to get on their journeys and their treks? Where would they get nourishment? And so beer was made because it was safe to drink. And the Trappist monasteries are all ruled by the Cistercian monks, and so they have really strict guidelines. They're vegetarians, and the beer has to be made within the four walls. And Orval created this ceremony every year because they can only make so much beer, and they make it all in. It looks like a a bowling pin bottle, small bowling pin bottle, and that's the only thing. They don't serve any draft, and it's the only beer they make, so it's very special. And they're about half the size of Great Lakes Brewery, to give you some perspective. And they're in, I don't know how many countries they export to, but quite a few. But you can just imagine when that beer is people really want it. It's very much revered in Belgium. And so they created this program that they want you to serve it properly and honor it once a year, which means somehow promote it. And they have 3 people on staff that travel around to make sure that people are serving it correctly. And if you do, then you're guaranteed to always be able to have it on your menu. So it's a quality statement, and to me, absolutely wonderful statement. And they have 3 levels. So they have regular ambassador, and then they have cum laude, and then they have summa cum laude. The summa cum laude will probably always be someone in Belgium. And they have about 20 or 22 out of the 500 or so ambassadors that are cum laude, so they're doing something special above and beyond. And so we periodically will buy their cheese, because they also make a wonderful cheese. We'll get that in. And most of these bars and restaurants are very small, and we have 18, so to get people trained in all of our stores to serve it properly is something to be noted, and they note it by us. So we're the only ones outside of Belgium that is a cum laude ambassador. So very proud of that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's my favorite beer. I'm saying that on air. My favorite beer in the world is Orval. So my kids know that. Everyone, yes.
Okay. John, go back to the importance of family, if you will, because I know how important your family is to you. Mm-hmm. And we've had discussions over the years, and you talk about your employees like their family. And in today's marketplace, corporate world, if you will, that is such a rarity for people to consider their employees to be family. Can you talk about that a little bit? Sure.
I mean, I mentioned before, Doug, we're in the people business, and that's what we're in. We're in the people business. I mean, I just don't know where we're eventually going to have the technology of robots serving you and cooking the food and all that. It still takes an awful lot of people to execute in a restaurant. And so, I try to really treat my employees how I would want to be treated and how I treat my family. And I think that culture goes all the way down. And I know it does, because we have even a lot of ex-employees now that have come back. And they're bringing their families,
sure.
And then their kids now. Hey, John, can you find them some summer work? So, family doesn't always mean just all love. There's times when they need a kick in the butt, and you got to give them that kick in the butt. But you also got to give them the pat on the back. And I think that's family too. And I think a lot of times that's missing. I think a lot of times we just think that it's that. All the times it's hugs and kisses, right? But sometimes, that kick in the butt is needed. But in the end, it's given that kick in the butt, and then, but I know you can do it, and I know you can take care of this, and I know that you're going to be better, and so let's move on. And so I think that's really become a big part of our culture.
Well, and that goes back to our discussion about respect.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not all hugs and kisses and, good job, good job. This was incorrect. There's kind of a redirecting there.
Right.
And what you said, I know you can do it.
Right.
Shows the respect that you have for them. And that's a huge component.
Right.
Of this whole thing.
And then we do have some people that don't fit, and it's funny, I was in Macedonia about 6 or 7 months ago, and I was watching an employee who really wasn't following the standards, and I went over, I introduced myself, and I said, where did you learn how to do that? Because that's not how we do it here. And he proceeded to say, well, what do you know? And I said, well, I've been doing this for a long time, and this is the store I used to run, and I'm telling you, this is not the way we do it. And then he left, and then I watched him, and he kept doing it. And so he doesn't have a place there. So that's okay too. And I think sometimes we're afraid of making people live up to our standards, because that hurts everyone in the building if we're not holding people accountable to the standards that we've set for them.
I doubt that you remember this, but at some point you and I were having lunch maybe 20 or 25 years ago, and we were sitting in a booth in one of the lizards, and I can't remember which it was, but you balled up a napkin and threw it out on the floor.
Yeah.
And I said, John, what are you doing? And you said, I want to see what happens. I want to see who takes the initiative to pick that up and who doesn't. So kind of along the same lines, you've been doing that for a long time.
A long time, yeah. Because I got to be honest, I still, when I walk in the building, I pick things up. Last night I was at one of our Columbus locations, actually during the afternoon, and I'm bussing tables. I'm not afraid to do any of those things, I'm not above doing those things, and people have to know that the three owners will still do those things if we have to do those things, and not because we have to, but you got to set the example for your people, and now, as big as we are, I wish I knew everyone by name. It doesn't happen like that. It's a little different, but I still think that maybe in their back of the mind, when they see an owner walk in and do that, that it
I'm sure it has a really positive effect.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
John, let's talk about some strategies for success.
Yeah.
You and I have talked a little bit about these three. And one that you say is the old adage, basically, of treating people like you want to be treated.
Yeah, I think, and it's not only, this doesn't just imply to our associates or our employees, but also our guests. We all know what our expectation when we go out to eat. Our guests are there; they're paying their hard-earned money. And we've got to deliver that. I will tell you, though, we do have to pay, with respect. But I will tell you that the guest isn't always right, and a lot of people like to say that in a restaurant, that no matter what they're, well, that can we come to some kind of understanding when that's not true. And so we still have to run a business too. But I think treating that guest with respect, no matter what, it goes a long way. And the same thing with our employees. Treat them like you would want to be treated. And I think if senior management period always has that in the front of their brain, when they're dealing with their employees or dealing with guests, it goes a long way. It's so simple, but yet, Doug, why is it so hard sometimes?
Right, and it really is. So we should all bear that in mind, because it is simple.
Yep.
Another really simple thing, and maybe not, is something you touched on before too, about listen to be understood.
Yes. I think, again, in our world today, we have so many different cultures, and we're trying to build a team, and also our guests that are coming into our restaurant. I think a lot of times we're quick to open our mouth, and that art of standing back and really listening to the guests, especially when a guest has an issue, listening to them and listening out. A lot of them just want to be acknowledged. A lot of them don't expect their whole meal to be paid for or expect anything. They just want to be heard, and they want their opinion heard. And it's the same with our employees. Getting in the restaurants, when I usually go into one of my restaurants, you would think I would go straight to the manager. I don't do that. I usually go right to an employee, and usually a lot of times it's someone I know. Sometimes it's someone I don't know. if I introduce myself, but I always ask them how it's going. What is it that we could do better, and try to listen to them, because they're now the ones on the front line. I'm in the ivory tower, and sometimes it's hard, when you get into your restaurants to really get on their level and get a good understanding and listen to them, and then take those good ideas back.
Right, right. The third thing you talk about, John, is the very best restaurants advertise by word of mouth.
Yeah.
And we've talked a little bit about that. Your best marketing is not marketing that you pay for.
Right.
It's...
Yeah, and this comes from my partner, Jim, who started 35 years ago. I mean, we've always believed in giving that value to the guest, and by not spending a lot of time advertising and TV or print, so we don't do any of those things. We never have. You might see every once in a while, but it's usually in conjunction with another event or another purveyor. But for the most part, we want to take that care of that guest when they come back, so that they tell 7 or 8 people how happy they are, and they come back.
John, we need to close it off. I would just add a fourth really quickly.
Okay.
And that is you be humble.
Thank you.
John, thanks so much for being here today. It has been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Pleasure seeing you again, Doug.
So there is a town near us who the perception is by the people who live there that they have the best of everything. Best town, best residents, best library, best restaurants, so on and so forth. Recently, their downtown section was redone. New pavement on the roads, new crosswalks. Now, mind you, these crosswalks were gorgeous. Brick to contrast with the asphalt of the streets. Just really classy. Well, imagine my surprise when I drove through the center of town after a rainstorm, and there were little apron signs set up at each end of the crosswalk saying, "Caution, slippery when wet." Now, here's the question. Wouldn't you think that a community that has the best of everything would also have the best brains? And someone would realize before spending all the money for this brick that maybe the bricks would be slippery and maybe we had not better install them. Well, several months later, driving through the community again, someone obviously had realized that, because all of the bricks had been covered over with a gray material matching the asphalt roads. Now, best of everything? Maybe not.